Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's session of Educational AMAs, where we speak with mentors, investors, and partners of our Tech Lab network on important topics for early-stage entrepreneurs. For this week's AMA, we'll be discussing accounting and tax considerations for Web3 startups. Our special guest is Alex So, founder and group managing partner of Fastlane Capital, an accountancy and advisory firm with a particular focus on entrepreneurs, startups, fast-growing technology companies, angel investors, and venture capitalists. Their crypto client portfolio includes crypto exchanges, Layer 2 tokens, DAOs, crypto funds, DeFi projects, and blockchain fintech firms. Alex is a fellow member of CPA Australia and has over 20 years of professional finance and accounting, corporate finance, and investment experience. He's an investor in early stage and high growth companies and is also a mentor within the OTL network. So Alex, for us to begin, why don't you share a little bit about how you got into the Web3 space, what got you interested in it, and what your thoughts are in terms of how accounting and tax can be considered for startups in this space.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me here today. I'm Alex. I run an accounting and advisory firm since 2014. Before that, I used to work for corporates in the financial sectors. So I've been doing what I'm doing for the accounting space and tax advice until recently. I would say last 2-3 years. A lot of my clients and friends, they get involved in crypto and blockchain, and often they have the questions about my tax and accounting. What do I need to know? And then I started to learn. I started to do readings and talk to people and learn. And also by serving my client, I actually learn from them as well. So that's how I would say I know something about accounting and tax in this space. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I will try my best to share my thoughts with you today.
Wonderful. So from a Hong Kong accounting standards perspective, how do we classify and treat cryptocurrency?
Okay, this is interesting questions. Often when we first started, first of all, A is why we needed to do audit. So audit is required for a Hong Kong company, a Hong Kong limited company, and they need to do an audit and to do the tax filing, right? So that's the reason why they want to do an audit for that. And in order to do that, they need to find an auditor to review their books, the records, the financial statements, and to express an opinion about their audit financial statements, and then able to file the form. Now, so in order to prepare the financial statements, then people say, oh, okay, traditionally, if I have a piece of chair, a piece of equipment, I have revenue, I have expenses, so they are quite clear in terms of how to classify those items according to the accounting standards. But when we come to the blockchain crypto tokens, it's kind of not too sure what to do, right? In fact, there's no explicit accounting standards for blockchain or crypto tokens. There are no specific accounting standard for that. So what do we do? I think it's not a question just us, but also like as a whole, the whole accounting industry globally. So how we look at it is that we look into what are the accounting standard that is potentially applicable, and then finally we find an existing accounting standard actually can apply to blockchain and tokens, which we say, okay, we look at the nature of the tokens, the technology. We believe that it is a intangible asset. So it is an asset that's intangible, meaning that it's not physical, we not touch it, but there's a value. So yes, so in the accounting standard, we say we can consider the value of the underlying intangible asset, which is the blockchain, the tokens, and then we assign a value to that. And then we need to do the valuation of the tokens. We look at assets. So typically we look at whether there's impairment of the value, whether the asset actually decreased the value, or whether there's potential increase of the value. So that's how we classify it. And if there's a decrease or increase of the value, those differences will be reflected as in the profit and loss of the company.
Okay, that's interesting, actually.
Okay, so everyone has to take a pause. I think there's a technical problem with our mic. So give us a minute. We'll try to fix it, and we'll be right back. video back on. Audio on. Video back on in 3, 2.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulty. Hopefully things are much better. Perfect. So why don't we recap a little bit, Alex? Why don't we go back to how does Hong Kong accounting standards classify and treat cryptocurrency?
Okay, sure. So first of all, why we need to think about accounting and this crypto, and so why we need to apply the accounting standard for that. So basically, it's because say in Hong Kong, all the Hong Kong company require an audit for the company financial statements, and in order to do so, you need to prepare the financial statements, and then you need to record your transactions. Now, and then when you do the audit, the reason you do the audit because you need to file the tax return, right? So you need an auditor to review your financial statements, and they will look into how you record the transactions. Now, regarding the accounting standards, it's interesting enough. There's no specific accounting standard for crypto or blockchain tokens. There's no such a thing. And so we accounting industry actually facing a problem how to deal with it. So it's not just Hong Kong, but it's like globally, the whole accounting profession say, what do we do about it? So we look into the existing accounting standards, and fortunately, we are able to find one that we think we can apply to the Bitcoin and the blockchain valuations. So this is the accounting for the intangible assets. So intangible assets meaning that there's no physical, you cannot touch it, it's not physical, exists, but we do see that there's a value, so this is an asset. So in order to look into the value of the assets, and then we will see that there's any changes of the value. Let's say if there's increase of the value of the token, then obviously there will be a gain. If there's a decrease of the value, there will be a loss. And those profit and loss will be reflected in the financial statements, in the profit and loss statements as a result.
That's very interesting because cryptocurrencies as an asset is so volatile. There's ups, there's downs, especially recently. So it's good to know that there is a way to account for some of these profits and losses. So our next question is, what are the tax implications for companies issuing, handling, or exchanging cryptocurrencies in Hong Kong?
Yes, so it's a tough question. I mean, again, it's just something relatively new. New as in like it's been around a couple of years, been popular. Now, accounting and tax. I mean, it's been a lot older before, meaning that it's new to them, and then try to figure out like what does it mean. So accounting is the first step as in how you classify from accounting perspective as like, okay, this is asset. And then obviously the governments, whether it's Hong Kong or other jurisdiction, they are really keen to look into how to get tax from you or from the company. So yes, you have to pay tax for dealing with crypto. Um, and it's just new. And about 2 years ago, Hong Kong Inland Revenue Department actually provided guidance about how to really think about this tax assessment on those tokens. Again, this is not a law; it's a guidance from the tax office, and it gives you an idea how they see it. And things keep changing. Now they propose three way of looking at it. They look into the tokens in three categories. One is whether it's a payment tokens, and the second is a security token, and then the last one is a utility tokens. Now they will look into the nature of the token and determine how they will tax you. Okay, so let's talk about the payment. Payment token is like Bitcoin, right? So is an asset that actually, if you trade the asset, if you make money, yes, there potential there are tax implications for that. It's a matter of how frequent you trade the payment token or how frequent you trade the assets. Now in Hong Kong, there is no capital gain tax in Hong Kong.
Right.
That means if you trade, you hold it, and then you sell it with the intention of as an investment, so you will probably not, you can argue that this is not a trading income and there is no capital gain tax, you don't pay tax for that. But if you train like a professional, your main business is trading, yes, then you're very likely that the profit that you gain will not be considered as capital gain. It will be considered as your normal business income, and then subject to corporate tax. Now, then let's talk about the securities token. Now, security tokens is issued in a way that you become an owner or become an equity ownership of the company, right? So in that sense, you are having the shares of the project, and so that is what we consider as a capital in nature. So that means you don't get taxed as a capital, so you don't pay tax on securities. But you have to be mindful that as a security token, that will be touched on other legal issues, as in the company or the individual issuing the securities, because there are laws regarding issuing securities or tokens. So one have to be mindful about the security token. Now the last thing is the utility tokens. Now the utility tokens is given to you with a potential of using it for future benefits, and again that will be subject to tax. So one have to look at the nature of the tokens and to see what categories of tokens are belongs to.
Okay, that's very interesting. So from, let's say I'm just trading cryptocurrencies, what threshold is it that in which it's no longer considered capital gains and not taxable, but all then turns into sort of a trading income tax? At what point is that?
Yeah. So I would say this question actually applies to more or less everything. Let's say if you're trading stocks. So if you are frequently trading, um, meaning that if you're a day trader, you trade every day, and then your main income are derived from the trading, then the tax office will very likely argue that it is actually your main source of income, right? And then very likely that you will be subject to corporate tax and individual tax. Same thing as you are flipping properties, right? So you buy properties and then you hold it and you flip it. You buy it, flip it, and then very likely that they say, okay, your main business is trading properties, and your main business is buying and selling properties, and then yes, the property, the profit that you gain from the property will be subject to tax. The same thing as in the token. If you're trading very frequently, yes, very likely you will be subject to tax. And again, it is arguable. It's really depend on the facts and the circumstances. If you buy it and then you hold it with the intention that it's for hold it for a long time, yes, then probably you can say this is for long-term investment, for long-term hold, and the gain from that will not be subject to capital gain tax.
Very interesting. So I'm curious about if there's a difference between holding Bitcoin and Ethereum versus perhaps other alternative coins. Are there different classifications for these altcoins versus maybe some of these more stable coins?
Okay, I would say there's no differences in terms of how we see the value. I mean, obviously it's fluctuate. I mean, there's a big cap, like Bitcoin big cap tokens and altcoin smaller cap. Yeah, that's definitely no. I would say there's no differences. I think the trouble is the liquidity. I mean, in terms of you determine the value of the underlying asset, the token, how you establish the value. I would say Bitcoin is more transparent market, so it's much easier to know like what are the current value, the market value of Bitcoin versus like some of the illiquid tokens or even not tradable tokens. Then how you establish the value. I mean that will be the challenges.
Very interesting. So let's say I receive a payment in cryptocurrency from a customer. How do I classify that in my books? Is it the same? And
Okay. Yes. I mean, it's not uncommon that people start receiving like crypto as a way of a payment. Like in fact, our accounting firm actually accept stablecoin as a way of a payment. Yeah, so that actually as a result of providing services. So that means it's income, right? So we provide service in return of receiving the tokens, and that token become my income. So that income will be recorded in my company, and that will be subject to tax.
Okay, very interesting. Um, how about if I received a payment in NFTs? How would I perhaps classify something like that?
Well, I would say there's no differences in terms of NFT or altcoin or like Bitcoin or stable coins. I mean, I think that the essence is like in Hong Kong. I would say in Hong Kong, it's really they look at it's how you generate the profit, where you generate the profit, how you provide the services, where you provide. I mean, if you provide in Hong Kong the services, and then those rewards, those compensation will be subject to Hong Kong tax. So that means if you, I mean, this is just sidetrack a little bit. Let's say if you have a Hong Kong company, but then you're not operating in Hong Kong, right? You operate outside of Hong Kong, and then you provide services, and then those income come to the company, come to Hong Kong. Those tax very likely you can claim offshore tax exemption. So you're not paying tax to the Hong Kong government because not simply you have a Hong Kong company, but then the service you provide is outside Hong Kong. So the token that you receive will not subject to Hong Kong tax.
Very interesting. Okay, so perhaps that's something startups should consider when setting up their entities.
Yes. Yes.
Very interesting. So with the recording of an NFT, let's say I did receive a payment of an NFT from a customer, that valuation can change based on how much it traded for in the market. At what valuation would I record that NFT in my books?
Okay. So it's similar to, let's say, you run a business, you receive US dollar, you receive Hong Kong dollar, you receive euro, and it's all fluctuate, right? So it's the same sort of, principle or mechanism. So obviously you send them an invoice and say, hey, look, this is how much I'm going to charge you, and you pay me the crypto. So that will be, I would say, like an exchange rate at that point, right, for the crypto that we receive, right? But then when you do your reporting, that will be recorded as sales, and then you do the exchange, and so you have the fiat, equivalent, right, in the books, and then by the year end, right, then you need to provide the financial performance, the profit and loss of the year, right, and then you use the year-end rate and see whether that exchange rate actually change versus the day actually you have the transactions. So these changes will be reflected in the P&L. If you're making a gain, that if you're not selling it yet, so that will be unrealized profit, right? If you have a loss but you're not selling it yet, so that will be unrealized loss. So it's very similar to you have received multiple, payment in different currencies. The same logic.
Okay, interesting. Now, what about if I wanted to pay my employees in cryptocurrency? Maybe their salary or bonus as an alternative to company shares.
Yep.
Will they get taxed on this?
Definitely. So the tax office will not let go of you. Yes, and it's a very common problem not problem, but the common mistake people thought that, hey, look, I give you tokens, then yes, it's off the book. But no, it's subject to tax. The same thing as in, you work for me, I give you shares of the company, and those shares actually also is a reported income to the tax office. Yes, to the extent that every year in Hong Kong, every company has to submit the employees return, and then you have to specify how much tokens actually you gave it to your staff, and that will be subject to tax as well.
Okay, and for my employees, how would they manage that taxation on their end? Is it a little bit more complicated, or would a regular accountant be able to help manage this for them?
Yeah, that's where I come, where I can help. Yes, I mean, We first started, I mean, in the last 2 3 years, we do have clients actually in the crypto space, in various sort of like from crypto exchange to DeFi project, blockchain company. Yes, is I would say is they need to aware that this is required. Otherwise, actually, they breach the law, that is penalty and all these things. Um, and I think also keep taking track of how I think the problem in particular is the vesting schemes, right? So you don't necessarily give the token to your employee like everything in one go. So you have a vesting schemes. So you have to make sure that okay, I got 100 to give it to that person, then I'm giving 20 this time, 20 and the next year. So you have to make sure that you have this vesting scheme being properly recorded, not verbally, but also reflected in the employment contracts. So that has to be written, and then you have the basis for the reporting. So yes, there's a lot of I would say housekeeping and payroll management, so to speak, for giving tokens to the staff.
Very interesting. So we definitely need an accounting firm like yours to assist us with all of these complicated matters. So if I make a profit from my crypto investments, do I have to pay taxes on those?
Yes, unfortunately, it keeps saying yes. Yes. I mean, the tax office really would like to get a hand of the profits. I would say you cannot really escape it. It's I think how you structure it and where you want to do it. I mean, and again, paying tax is not something really bad, so to speak, because you don't have make money, then you have to pay tax. And I would say you have to pay tax anyway. So you find the place that actually could pay the lowest tax, right? So if you have an income and then you're not paying tax at all, is kind of strange. Um, then you want to find some way to pay tax and then you stop there, right? So it's a matter you pay, a U.S. jurisdiction or if you're paying a lower tax jurisdiction in Hong Kong. So that will be a bit of tax planning behind in terms of how you want to operate your business, how you want to deliver services, and then find a way to pay the right amount of tax. I think that's important.
So with the jurisdictions in mind, is it better to launch a crypto-based project in Hong Kong? Or what other popular jurisdictions should we consider when running a crypto-based project?
Well, okay. I think it's a big topic depending on what you want to achieve and what you want to do. I think there's certain, I would say, certain projects is a relatively speaking, it's difficult to launch in Hong Kong because there are not accounting or tax issues. It's more about legal issues. I think the last previous AMA with Charles, they talked about this legal considerations, which basically, if you are doing an ICO in Hong Kong, you need a license to do it. It's under SFC. It's a regular activities. They treat it as like fundraising. They treat it as you are selling securities. So you need a license to do it, right? So yes, if you're prepared to get a license, yes, you can do it in Hong Kong. That's fine. I mean, there are licenses given by the Hong Kong authority. I mean, there are at least two. I know they have license to do it as exchange and also supporting ICO. Um, but other than that, if you're not launching or issuing tokens, are not prepared to get a license, there are other jurisdictions that you can do it. I think there are two jurisdictions which is pretty common, which we handle a lot in the last couple of years. I would say BVI and Cayman Islands. They are crypto friendly. They really want to take a big market shares for companies want to do crypto. I mean they allowed um, companies to issue tokens. But again, I think it's not a matter of just issuing tokens. It's where you want to launch a product and the tokens, and then you need to think about whether you apply the local law. So that means even despite the fact that you set up a Cayman company and then issue tokens, but if you're doing selling the tokens in Hong Kong, then you're under the Hong Kong jurisdiction, right? So you still have a bit of consideration there. But I would say issuing tokens, for instance, means that if you do it offshore, like BVI and Cayman, you have more flexibility, right? Now, but that one thing, but then you need to think about other considerations, as in like where you hire people, right? Where you get the talents. Yes, Hong Kong is continues to be a big place with a lot of talents, a lot of interest. So what I see is people will have like a dual structure, right? You will have like the Cayman companies um, to do more the crypto side of things, and then you have an operating company, let's say in Hong Kong or even Singapore, to be the operating company, hiring people, keep the business running. So that is important. Um, and also, so this is going back to early on. We talked about this audit and taxations or reporting requirements. Definitely, if you have a Hong Kong company, you can hold crypto. So you just report it. It's illegal, but then you need to do all the taxation, the filing. That is a bit of complicated, and that costs you a little bit more, maybe. But if you purely holding crypto, if you don't want to hold it individually, you can use a Cayman, you can BVI to hold it. There's no reporting requirement that you need to do. So that means in terms of what underlying asset hold under a BVI and Cayman. So that means you can skip the reporting side of it and all the auditing part of it, purely using a Cayman and BVI as a holding company of the crypto. Similar concept that people using the offshore company to hold other assets, like property or other things. I think that gives a bit of flexibility. If you consider there are offshore jurisdiction which is legit, that really allows you to do the crypto business.
Very interesting. There's a lot of ways that I suppose we should consider when structuring the entities to make sure that everything is properly accounted for in a way that
Yeah.
best suits the company. So we actually have a question that's come in from the audience.
Okay.
Stella Jiang, she's launching her own NFT collection and she wants to set up a company to hold the IP rights of the images. However, when they receive payments of the NFT, they will receive payments of NFTs in Ethereum. Would it be better to set up the IP rights holding company in Hong Kong or offshore?
Okay, it's a legal questions. I can share my view. I think it doesn't really matter in terms of Hong Kong or BVI because depending on where you want to get the protection, then you apply for the IP. So the IP can associate with the BVI and Cayman. It could be associated with a Hong Kong company as well. So it's really about this. You need the IP lawyer to help you out. But I would say it's kind of neutral in terms of the company to hold IP. But then when you consider about receiving you have royalties. So I suppose you have the IP and you have royalties. Then yes, those royalties become your income, and then you need to think about like, okay, this is my income. So and what is the associated expenses, right? So typically, if you have the income, you have expenses, then you have the profit, then you pay the tax for your profit. So you need to think about how you want to pack your income and where you want to pack your expenses. Because if you have a company that only incurring expenses but not having income, then you need to think about how you finance it, how you actually pay the bill. So then you may have like a BVI sitting there getting a royalty income, and then you have an operating company actually hiring people, but then how you get your royalty to back to the Hong Kong company and then pay for the expenses, it is all doable. But I think these are the questions that perhaps we can have a separate chat with you and to think about like where those people are launching the project and yeah, we can take it from there as well.
Wonderful. Maybe Stella, it'd be great for you to reach out to Alex at Fastlane Capital, and he'll be happy to assist you with those questions. Though she did have a follow-up question as well that maybe we can cover. She asked, maybe setting up the IP rights holding company in Hong Kong and another company elsewhere that handles the payments and transactions. I suppose you just covered that, which is it depends on how you manage the flow of the assets if you have an operating company versus one that collects all the royalties. Perhaps this is something that you can discuss in further detail.
Yeah, I think you have to think about you have to balance the cash flow, Like I mean, you got cash here, and then you get the inflow here and the outflow there, and how you match it up. And so there will be two companies, let's say, then there will be intercompany transactions, right? So there will be additional consideration to think about whether the relation of these two companies, whether it's a parent or subsidiary, or are they fellow company, or are they related, the holding structure, who is the ultimate shareholders. So that's like it's a bigger question, as in like just where the IP can tap to which entity. But you need to think about the cash flow, you need to think about the intercompany transactions, and whether like if it's a parent and subsidiary, then obviously the parent will be, invest into the subsidiary and then bring in the capital. That's one sense. So if that company actually make money, then how to take the money out. So whether you declare dividend back to the parent, and you as a shareholder of the parent, then you take the dividend. So when you take the dividend, whether you're subject to tax, in Hong Kong, yes, there's no dividend tax. There's no withholding tax, which is a good thing. Yeah, so there are quite a lot of like consideration in terms of when you start having multiple entities, and how how this whole different part actually act together.
Very interesting. It sounds like she could definitely use your assistance in structuring her company. So Brenda Law has another question. She asks, if my company is holding multiple NFTs, do I need to run revaluation monthly? If yes, how do we estimate the value of my NFT for the month?
Okay, you don't really have to reevaluate every month. I mean, yes, if you want to just keep track of, it is whether there's a market value. I mean, whether you can, find that information. Let's say you do OpenSea, probably you can see, there's a value there. Today is like 5. Ethereum, tomorrow will be 6. So yes, you got some information. You can, think about it. You can work on the valuation. But whether you want to do it monthly, probably not, unless you're trading, you're flipping. But for reporting purpose, it's for the it's swinging back to the audit. If you have a company, you need to do audit. Then you look at this period of time and then the reporting date. So let's say if you choose a financial year as of end of December, then what you need to do is just to get the value as of the year. That will be sufficient for the reporting. So the inter-month, inter-day movement, necessary to put in the books. I think yes, you can do it, but if you don't do it, that's fine.
And how would one go about valuing the NFT? Say they've been holding it. Would they cross-reference how other NFTs within the collection have been trading recently, or the previous value of which it traded before? I suppose when she bought it.
Yeah. So okay, it's similar concept as in how you evaluate an asset. There are different ways to value it, and I would say from a tax office perspective, it's really up to the director of the company how they justify the value, right? So there are different ways of doing it. I give you an example. Let's say something that we can more easily relate to. Let's say a property. So let's say I have a property, I have an apartment here, and say, okay, I need to think about how much it is, now worth. So I can do a couple of ways to think about that approach. That I can look at like, okay, whether there are like other similar properties trading around the corner. So I say, okay, yeah, just last month there's one just trade similar size, similar facing, so it's 5 million, so it's 5 million. I wrote my. But what if there's no trading for the last 3 years? Okay, so I will think about, hey, look, what about using an example, as in like if I want to construct something like this, what would be the cost for that? So there are different ways trying to come up with valuation, and then you need to have the auditor to agree. This is a good approach to do the valuation, and then that would be able to demonstrate to the tax office this is how much it's worth. Yes, if it's more liquid, there's an open market, it's much more easy to get the numbers. I give you another example. Let's say you're trading shares, the HSBC shares. Then you can easily find the value of HSBC shares just looking at the Bloomberg. You can find it. But what about if I invest into a private company, a startup? Then I need to do my reports. Then how much does this startup worth? Well, so again, you go through a different sort of financial model, comparable, and then you come up with the numbers and say, hey, look, I'm as a director, I've done my duty to work out this is, I think, is fair, and that's how we report it. So I would say valuation is art and science. Is you have to make the judgment. It's a judgment call.
Very interesting. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Okay. Well, I suppose that wraps up our questions for today. It's been very informative to think about how we need to consider structuring companies and the cash flow between all of them in order to manage the valuation or the accounting and taxation considerations of our Web3 startups. So I know it's an evolving space. I know there may be new considerations that come out as new legislation gets implemented. So we'll be sure to come to you if we have any more questions. And if anyone in the audience is interested, please reach out to either myself or to Alex if you want to ask any more specific questions as it relates to your business. So thank you everyone for tuning in today, and thank you, Alex, for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for
See you next time.
Thank you.